of Davos, where we are hosting the annual meeting 2023 in Davos. It's snowy outside, but nice and cozy here. And I have with me Param, who is going to give the introductory remarks, followed by a very distinguished panel from representing public sector, the innovation community, as well as business, who will share with us their thoughts about how we can promote and grow a sustainable blue economy and in line with India's presidency of G20 this year, which we're all very much looking forward to. So perhaps I could invite Param to kick us off. He's the CEO of Niti Ayagok, and I know him in my previous in his previous role when he was actually head of the Water Resources Group at the World Bank. So Param.
Thank you very much, Kim Hui, and good morning to all of you. Welcome to the India Sustainability Lounge. As you said, it's nice and warm inside. I was outside a little bit, and so I've sort of recovered from the cold. But it's really nice to be here and to talk about the blue economy. As Kim Hui mentioned, this is one of the central themes of India's G20 presidency. It comes under the Environment Working Group, and again, we have a lot of experts here, a lot of international figures who are going to discuss this. Let me just say a little bit about how India looks at the blue economy, following the Indonesia G20 presidency and transitioning to India's G20 presidency. Again, this is going to be one of the major drivers of growth for us in India. It's identified as one of the top 10 growth drivers going forward. We have a coastline of over 7,000 kilometers. We have 9 states and 4 union territories along the coast. 2 of them are islands. So that's another, the island economy again fits in very well with the theme. And for India, whether you're looking at aquaculture or whether you're looking at shipping, there are many different aspects of the blue economy which are very, very important for India. And just to touch upon one transition from the Indonesian presidency, mangrove plantations along the coastline. This was something which the Indian delegation spotted there. Some work has happened in India already, particularly in Gujarat and Maharashtra. But again, one ambitious program is how can we develop mangrove plantations all along our coastline? And whether it's climate, it's adaptation to saline ingress, or whether it's livelihoods and developing these mangrove plantations. There's a lot we can learn from other countries, but that's one major initiative which we want to take forward. In addition to that, the whole cleanup of the coastline, that's a very, very important agenda. The Department of Earth Sciences in India organized a cleanup across most of our coastline on September 17th last year, and basically involved people. So how can we involve individual citizens to be involved in the cleanup of the oceans? We're talking of marine plastics, but again, this is going to be a major initiative, again, which India is taking to the G20, which we call lifestyle for the environment, which Prime Minister Modi launched on the 20th of October last year, along with the UN Secretary General. It's about how individuals and communities can contribute to climate, to the environment, and cleaning up the coastline is a very, very important part of that. And hopefully, as part of the blue economy, we can discuss how can that be done at scale. In addition to that, a couple of other things I wanted to mention from an India perspective, which is the Deep Ocean Mission, which was launched in 2021, which is going beyond the sort of coastline, but taking it out further into the ocean on a number of fronts, whether it's on fishing, on whether it's on developing energy sources. So there's a lot of momentum around that. Ship building and ship wrecking. We have more than 200 ports in India. So as cargo, it's important, but we are apparently one of the top 5 countries in the world in terms of breaking down ships and there's a port in Gujarat which does that. So again, scrapping of ships and ship wrecking, if that's the term, is another important agenda which can generate a lot of economic activity. So I think overall, the whole blue economy will figure centrally in our G20, but it'll be great to hear from the experts and the different figures from the UN on how you see India's presidency leading on the blue economy. What do you think are the priority areas? where we can collaborate with other countries and ultimately arrive at some important decisions and way forwards beyond the presidency, which can then be rolled out globally. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Param. I'm very excited about the LIFE program because when we think about the climate issues, it is a global challenge. It is a collective action problem. And if we can mobilize communities, governments, business to all work together, right, and each contributing their part, I think we can move faster and further together. So very excited and very much looking forward to working with India and your G20 presidency on the LIFE program and bring it to life, right? The core theme of this year's annual meeting is cooperation in a fragmented world, right? And if you read the opening statements, it talks about the idea of a polycrisis, right? And how various systemic crises, whether it's around food, energy, climate, environmental, geopolitical tensions, economic recession, the bad news just goes on. But the challenge with this polycrisis is that these crises are all happening at the same time. And in fact, they're reinforcing each other and creating much more severe consequences. So part of the challenge that we'll put to all the people meeting in Davos, how do we deal and how do we lead in the current state of the world, right? And the good news is that even though the crises are interconnected, solutions are also interconnected. And really, we want to look at how we can explore solutions and to build an economy that actually serves people, create jobs, protect livelihoods, as well as is good for the environment and ideally also supports economic growth and development, right? With now, I would like to turn to Peter Thompson, right? He's the UN Special Envoy for the Ocean. And Peter, I've heard you say that last year was a very good ocean year. Maybe you can do a bit of a recap on all the successes from last year, but more importantly, looking forward, right? What are the kinds of successes that you hope to see this year? What's on your mind, and how can we support you, and how can we work with India, right, as part of G20 to support these ambitions?
Well, tremendously exciting that India is taking on the presidency of G20. Did a lot of work with the Indonesians when they were chairing last year, and was present at the launch of Oceans 20 in Bali. So I'm really fully committed, along with everybody in this room, I guess, to the continuity of that that was started in Indonesia, and that India's leadership this year, huge. Kim has talked about last year as a successful year for the oceans. It really was. And when people talk about what a bad state the world's in, one of the things I like to emphasize is that multilateralism is alive and well, and the ocean proves that. I mean, we started the year in Nairobi with the agreement to negotiate a binding international treaty on plastic pollution for the planet. Major step forward, and those negotiations are ongoing now, of course. Next one, May, INC2 in May in Paris. Then, of course, the WTO, which after so many decades of negotiation finally agreed last year, let's ban harmful fisheries subsidies. Subsidies tuned to $20-30 billion a year of public monies, which are going towards supporting industrial fishing fleets which were engaged in illegal fishing, for example, right? So that was a great step forward as well. There were so many more, but the one I really want to emphasize is Montreal, because there and when I say we, I mean all nations on earth agreed to these United Nations meetings last year, outcomes last year. So the global biodiversity framework we agreed in Montreal last month, I don't think it's been amplified enough as to how important that is for us. Why have we brought 30 by 30 into that framework? It's because science told us if we don't, we're going to see extinctions on the level that we haven't seen since the dinosaurs were extinct. And we've only got 7 years to do that. So we need to be amplifying that. I think Christmas got in the way and sort of disappeared off everybody's radars. But we've got to bring it back. It's coming back now at WEF, and in Vancouver next month, we're meeting in this Impact 5 meeting, which is IUCN and the Government of Canada are hosting that. And that's about marine protected areas, how we're going to get to 30% of the ocean over the next 77 years being protected. So all of this, and there's so many other big victories that the ocean had last year through multilateralism. I just want to emphasize that India, as leader of G20 in 2023, is going to have this huge responsibility of helping us actually implement all these things. When we talk about something like the WTO subsidies, it's unfinished work, and we're going to need G20 to be pushing hard in Geneva. When we're talking about the plastic treaty, we're going to need India as the voice of G20 speaking up in May in Paris on making sure that this is a robust treaty, that the plague of plastic pollution that we have put on the world is going to come to an end through this treaty. And I'm particularly from the ocean point of view emphasizing microplastics, because this, I think, is not getting as much as exposure as it should. It's a universal problem. We've all got it. You've done fantastic work on recycling, but you know that the microplastics, you can't recycle that. You can't capture it. So we need a lot more attention on that. And as I say, we're really looking to India. I'm not even touching on fishing or anything like that. In all these areas, you have so much to offer. And of course, we all want to be there in support of you.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Before I invite Param to respond, I'll hear from the other panelists. Tim, you're the Vice Chairperson of Climate Action in Salesforce, which is very much which has been at the forefront of pushing for net zero, nature positive outcomes, and not just within your own institution, but also mobilizing and supporting the ecosystem. One of the initiatives you launched, I think more than 2 years ago, was called Trillion Trees Initiative, which was an ambition to protect, restore, right, 1 trillion trees over the next decade, right? I'd love to hear some updates from you, but before you start, Salesforce was also a big supporter of Uplink, which is an open innovation platform, right? They've supported hundreds of innovators around different nature challenges. You've defined them, and many of these innovators actually come from India. So maybe, Tim, if you could share with us some of the achievements so far, and also what are some of your plans forward.
Thank you, Gimwei, and thank you also to India for hosting us for this event. We're also very pleased about the G20 agenda and India's leadership. India is a very important country for Salesforce. It's home to our second largest staff base outside of the US, growing, and we have also through the ecosystem of applications and companies around Salesforce contributing to sustainable growth in India. We see ourselves in this role not only as Salesforce, but also as working with our thousands of customers who are all on a similar journey. So we're always happy to share the net zero, nature positive lessons that we learn, and we learn them daily with all our customers. And this is something we would also like to bring more to India. Our focus on the ocean space is on blue carbon. We stood up a net zero marketplace in October, the first voluntary carbon marketplace that has free independent third-party ratings for all the projects. That you can see that because we recognize that the voluntary carbon market has problems, but we can fix them. They're imminently fixable, and with that, it can be one avenue for billions of dollars of much needed investments into nature-based solutions. So on the net zero, nature positive journey, we also see very much the 1 trillion tree initiative. We're also a supporter of the Friends of Ocean Action, and we run a sustainable ocean program in Salesforce. So what better space than where the forest meets the ocean? So we will focus in particular on mangroves. The Mangrove Breakthrough is a new initiative that the UN high-level champions launched at COP27, and there'll be a much larger event around that at COP28. And we also hope that many other companies and governments will join this endeavor. The aim is with around $4 billion to restore 15 million hectares of mangroves, or conserve and restore an additional 15 million hectares of mangroves. 40% of the world's mangroves are in Southeast Asia or South Asia, so there's significant potential in India. I think the sustainable ocean agenda is also not going to go away after this presidency, because for all the G20 countries, this will remain a very important investment area. I would like to put an emphasis on the sustainable ocean blue economy, which means that local communities, in particular for nature-based solutions, have to be beneficiaries and drivers and owners of these solutions. Not only because it's fair and just, but because that ensures that the longevity of these solutions is guaranteed. So the local community involvement is very important for us. And I'd like to end on your point of the poly crisis requires multi-solvers, right? So we all have to become multi-solvers. Ecosystems are already multi-solvers. They solve for many different issues, mangroves all the way from fisheries to carbon to biodiversity to livelihoods. So I think we're at the cusp of a breakthrough in nature finance, in climate finance that we're seeing here in Davos and in other places now. So it's very exciting times.
Thank you, Tim. I like mangrove systems. Is one of the most critical ecosystems. In fact, all of them are probably critical. It's just that for me, mangrove is the best illustration. Land meets the sea is also where a lot of livelihoods are intertwined. When you have healthy mangroves, you have better resilience. You also sequester carbon is part of climate action, but more importantly, it is the breeding ground and also livelihoods for many of the fishes, of whom majority are women. And right now, I'd like to turn to Epi. You're from Recycler. Peter talked about microplastics. You've been in the business of trying to recover waste, right, from the ocean. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you're doing and what it would take for you to really speed and scale it going forward?
So I think, thanks, Ranjan. We're really proud that being an India-based startup, we're also trying to contribute into that mission. And one of the major focus area, what we understand from G20, circular economy. And we being a startup operating in that space for the last 7 years, we'd like to play a bigger role in that. We started as a company which is basically into waste management and trying to really bring circularity and majorly focusing on plastic for the first 4 years. Now we're diversified into multiple categories of it. But plastic is always a focus. And we're almost channelizing 1 million metric ton will get channelized through our system this year, and 80% of it will be plastic. But what we understood that overall, to solve this plastic problem, we have 7,500 kilometers of coastal line, we generate millions of metric tons of plastic, and the most of that, good portion of that goes to ocean. And as we know that by 2040, 29 million metric tons will be in the ocean yearly, but cumulative 600 million metric tons. And I heard a report that by 2040, there will be more plastic than the fishes in the ocean.
On the current
and we all know that the ocean economy is very important for every country. All these people very important. So what, and microplastic problem, as I said, I heard that every one of us consumes some 5 grams of microplastic every month. We don't even know because it comes from ocean. That's harmful for all of us. It has a diverse impact every year. So what we are trying to bring is that we can't really do anything what has happened till date. It has already happened. So the solutions and technologies which we are building are basically to prevent the next plastic going there. Bring back the plastic into circularity. And it's not easy. It's not easy when you look at the way India has 1.3 billion people, 7,500 kilometers of 34 states and union territories. It's a large country. So it needs a different kind of approach and solution at different places to really. And major thing is required is a behavioral change. I think with such a large number of people, until the littering stops, the way plastic is not bad, but the littering is very, very bad, and the way it is handled is very bad. So what we are looking as a startup to really bring in that behavioral change in the consumer's mind, bringing that in the country which we have seen in the last 25 years that there is 2 things works in India. One is a fear or a greed. Only 2 things works for bringing the mass level behavioral change. So what we are working on the technology, one of the innovations we did recently is a deposit return system. We launched in one of the area in India, which is like hilly area. It was not ocean, but it was hilly area, Kedarnath. And there was a problem there that everybody was consuming water and throwing it in the places. Our Honorable Prime Minister in May actually came on his Mann Ki Baat program and he said that it should be stopped there. What we went there and then we implemented this scheme completely in that area. We saw almost 50-55% collection change because there was a deposit of 10 rupee on every container. And people, after consuming, became conscious about it. The whole behavioral change happened. So we feel that the technologies like deposit return system across the country level, across the state level, at least at the coastal area of it, will prevent the plastic littering and in further will really save oceans from what's happening today. So I think this kind of approach would like to take the next couple of years to solve this.
Thank you, AP. You have a
Can I
big
just-
job.
Can I just add one thing?
Yes.
Because I come from Fiji. I went to an Indian school in Fiji and a little bit of Indian. Fear and greed, yes, big part of culture, but also you should add love because it's such a big part of Indian culture as well. Love for nature, love for family.
Thank you.
I couldn't let that pass.
Mr. Rajendra, you're from the central government,
I'm from
joint,
the central government.
and you're the joint secretary for the promotion of internal trade and investment industry. So he spoke about circular economy. Tell us about how your plans for building a sustainable blue economy.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think India has come up with a blue economy draft policy and has a very ambitious plan. It wants to align itself with the sustainability principles, and the major verticals where we want international collaboration are on the how to use renewable energy for the fishermen folk, on the port infrastructure, as we are having around 12 major port and around 200 minor ports handling more than 1,500 metric tons of cargo every day. In the shipping sector, the coastal tourism and aquaculture and fisheries sector become cornerstone of this blue economy policy. Coming to the issue of behavioral change, because I'm by training a behavioral scientist and has practiced behavior change campaign on the plastics and sustainability for last 1 decade. I designed the campaigns. I thought, so I slightly like to disagree from you on the fear and greed or incentive as a principle. These can be used as a last mile to consolidate the gains of a campaign, but a campaign which rides on fear will never be sustainable. I did in a different way, and this was one of the best examples of a behavior change campaign back in 2009-10. And of course, we have Parmeshwar Nair, who has been expert in mainstreaming this kind of thing at a nationwide scale. But from my experience, I'll tell you, what is the best way or tool of to bringing about behavior change is not fear or incentive. It is basically leading by example. We have to stop preaching, and this was exactly the model we used. And that time, we have gone to the fishermen folk. We have taught them that what is the oceanic pollution, what is microplastic, how it is going to affect the marine, how the fishy, how the marine life has a different behavior. They gallop water, like unlike mammals, they do not selectively eat, and that is how this plastic is going into them. And we have told them about oceanic gyres that time. We have shown them the small documentaries to fishermen, and they became partners in the campaign, as you said. So we have to make the communities as a partners, and it cannot be a top-down approach. And if we have to really save the marine life, and we are very proud to tell today that we have an eminent panelist among us, Dr. Parmeshwar Nair, who has actually taken this movement of Swachh Bharat Mission, that is a Clean India campaign, where the behavior change has been the cornerstone of that. And now the Prime Minister has given this life for environment. That is a strong message to the world. When we are all, the discourse is all around technology, about the supply chains, about the entire engineering, about the industrial ecosystem, but entire discourse, we are forgetting the most important element, that is the human being. As long as we do not address this fundamental thing along with appropriate technological innovation, appropriate investments, if the human being is not in the discourse and we only keep on talking, I think it is a decade of action. I think we have to be answerable to the future generations. Otherwise, all of us will be questioned that when the planet was going through this kind of situation, we were all worried about our careers and about everything.
I've already questioned now about my children. We don't have to wait for the next generation.
Exactly.
Very
So I think
good.
it is a time we all have to now act, and I'm very proud that I come from a country where government is mainstream these policies. terms of life for environment and other things. So I think G20 presidency, we will be looking forward to more international collaboration on our blue economy policy.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We do have some time, and I'd like to open the time to the floor for quick questions. Yes, maybe we start with the lady. We collect all the questions, and then we'll get the panelists to respond. Please.
So at the onset, it has been wonderful listening.
Could you introduce yourself and then ask your question? Thank you.
So hi, I'm Ekta Narayan from Recycle. So I have a question for Mr. Peter. You spoke about microplastic. Do you think, we understand that, microplastic, one of the major sources are home and personal care products like shampoo, detergents, etc. So do you think this attracts attention of a global policy on composition standards of such products by companies who manufacture, produce the microplastics?
Before you answer, we'll take the other two questions. Yeah. Yes.
Masanori Kobayashi, Ocean Forest Research Institute of the Sustainability Foundation. I have a question to Aram that is doing the 420. India may be contemplating some consolidation and integration of governmental agencies to squarely address. And I just wondered if you already foreseen some positive transformation of the institutions. And I also wondered if you can comment on this shipbreaking industry. Do you intend to make changes in the businesses or regulations related to this?
Cool. And last question. Yes.
Hi, I'm Rakesh Gupta, and I run a global fund and capital raising firm based out of New York. I don't have a question specific, but I do have a viewpoint. Last year, I took my kids to Indonesia, and we have gone through the mangroves, and then they came back and said, "Why can't we see the same in India?" And that forces us as a global advisory firm to launch a sustainable fund for India. And we do look forward to working with Mr. Param and Rajendra and his office to invest more into the sustainability and largely the mangrove section, because that's what we are very close to.
Very good. I like that. Yes, and last comment.
One remark and a question. Remark is I think
You want to introduce yourself? Yes.
Assis Chaudhary. I run a management consulting company based out of Monaco, focused on sustainability. I missed your introduction, but
Avanish Pandey.
So you mentioned this fear and greed. I think that applies for humanity. And I really appreciate the addition of love. So that's and I think the masterclass was by Mr. Rajendra, who I think that's the way I have handled it. Like I think part of change management or cultural change in my career in the last 18 years, and so that was the part of it. The question is for Mr. Param. I have been part of recycling for ship breaking. In my past life, I have managed the decommissioned floating storage unit for crude oil and gas to recycle them when we didn't find any buyer, and we took it to Gujarat. So are we? I mean, that place is scary. That place is dangerous. What are there any plans to make it more safe, workable, safe condition for people who use papers as helmets and wrap up plastics as shoes? So I have seen that.
Alan.
Okay. So, okay, maybe we just collect the two quick questions and now invite them.
I'm Prakash. I have a space tech for sustainability. Basic from India. So my question about ocean safety and environment. 2 years back, I visited Puri, one of our holy sites, and I was walking on the beach, and I found entire sewage was entering into ocean. And then of course, I had a team from Germany, and that was actually shocking. In generally, like all the cities, also in new Asian economies, they have at every exit point they have ETP plants, and that was missing, and that was horrible. I mean,
so your question is,
Mr. Iyer.
Okay.
Is Niti Aayog for smart cities or something? Because if you don't do that, what we cannot help them. I mean, all the programs will be failed. If
City garbage is not entering into the ocean.
Okay. And last question. Yes.
Sandesh Dev, founder of Semi-Wash, we're cleaning rivers in Indonesia, collecting plastics. And my question would be, I understand it's the needs to clean our oceans, to clean our coastlines, but 90% of plastics in the ocean come from rivers. So I'm just curious to know, what is India doing to clean rivers?
Okay, very good. So perhaps I could invite any reactions from the panel, because it's not just Param's job to solve all the problems in India. And then I'll invite Param to close, including responding to some of the comments. So yes.
If I can respond to the recycling business in India and how it is being regulated. So as you know, there was a Hong Kong Convention on recycling, responsible recycling of the ships, and India acceded to that convention, and India has brought out a act, Shipping Recycling Act 2019, that gives a broader framework of regulation for those recyclers who want to come into the space, as well as the better working condition for the people who are there. Though we have a long way to go and in terms of enforcement, but India surely has put a institutional and legal framework which provides rights to the people to.
We recognize that, but when we work with we chose our contractors to handle the bit.
As you rightly said that, change takes a time. The law is very easy to enact, but when change has to be made, it's a collective collaborative exercise, and I think it's the government, people like you, and all the stakeholders, I think we'll have to work together. I'm sure with such leadership, we'll take that forward.
And Peter.
Perhaps I'll respond on the plastic side of things. I'm old enough to remember a world where there was no plastic, and it was very nice, thank you. And we weren't suffering because of the lack of plastic. So first of all, I'd just like to say that because, of course, plastic has so many champions in the world, rightly so. It's done great stuff in medicine and so on. I don't think we'll ever live in a world again where there is no plastic. But what we're trying to get in this internationally binding treaty is a more rational use of plastic. We don't need all the kinds of plastic which we currently have. We should only be dealing with recyclable plastic. We should be reusing as well as recycling. We should be using less plastic. This whole, as I described it, plague, because it is a plague when you look on the beaches of the world, even in uninhabited places, and you see this plastic refuse all along the beach. But I referred earlier to microplastics, and that's actually the more insidious problem which we are facing. Because the microplastics are what are coming back into our families, into ourselves, in the form of the fish that we're eating, in the air that we're breathing. In fact, all of us, if we went to the hospital and did a test, would find we've got plastic in our bloodstream. We know that plastic crosses the blood-brain barrier. We know it crosses the placental barrier. What's the implications of all this? We don't actually know. But it can't be good, can it? There are substitutes for plastic. There's a lady here from Bangalore who Kristen Teleki introduced me to yesterday. She's making what looks like plastic, but out of seaweed, and it's sachets of food. And you just drop the sachet into your soup with all the ingredients inside, and the packaging, which would normally be a plastic package, the packaging dissolves in the soup, and it's good for you because it's made out of seaweed. I mean, there are alternatives which can be developed, and I'm so happy that this lady from Bangalore is coming to Hobart, where we're having the big seaweed meeting next month. But microplastics is an important one for me. I have, Tim used to work at UNEP. Last few days, I've been in contact with UNEP to make sure that at INC 2, which is being held in Paris in May, that microplastics are right front and center in these, that it's not swept under the polyester carpet while people are just
Or remains invisible as it is now.
or while they concentrate on the macroplastics. So that's what I would emphasize. And when you talked about the cosmetics industry, you should also think about things like tires. You should be thinking about paint. I mentioned shipbreaking. This is all microplastics.
Mm.
And what happens with the microplastics from the paint and the tires and the cosmetics and all the rest is that when they go into the ocean, the toxins which are there from our other effluents, like heavy metals and chemicals, they attach to those microplastics. And it's actually those toxins which we're imbibing which are doing the damage.
Thank
It
you.
sounds depressing, but I think, the good thing is we focused on the problem. We're trying to get the solution now.
Thank you. We are running out of time, so if I could invite Abhi, just keep your comment very short. And Tim, if you have any last words, and then we'll have Param wrap up.
So,
Yeah.
what Vimal said about the municipal waste coming out and going to, I think, as I said, behavioral change, it can happen with love, fear, whatever. It has to happen at the end. That has to happen with the primary thing, to the lot of source level segregation. The infrastructure is required, the collection infrastructure, processing infrastructure. I think there are efforts, and thanks to service, they are looking at, there's a lot of investment right now. We have been approached by at least 25 created $1 billion funds for circularity. That's a focus, and we see that money is available. We need to bring that private government partnerships to build that infrastructure to process the waste. And that waste should not be looked at the waste, but it has to be looked at the resource. And that is looked at the resource, I think the sustainable business can be done.
Very good. Tim,
One point that links many of the questions, ecopreneurs. So we call ecopreneurs people who want to make saving the planet their business and their lives mission, and there are now millions of them. Every young person I speak to wants to be an ecopreneur, not an entrepreneur. So Uplink has already found 50,000 of them, and I think we should run a few more ocean-specific challenges, and then maybe one specific to India to find the startups that get the support from Salesforce, from the web, from others, with data tools, with some funding, with mentorship, to really build up very quickly this multi-billion-dollar nature and climate investment market that we see emerging, and it's about time that it comes. Ecopreneurs are the key to that, so happy to support Uplink as well in this topic.
thank you, Tim. And Param.
No, thanks. On ecopreneurs, it's a great idea. I don't know if you know, in India, we have more than 80,000 startups. And, they're like 60 every day. So more and more should become ecopreneur startups. So it's a great discussion, and, we'll be happy to sort of collaborate with you and others to take it forward. But let me touch upon 2 or 3 of the major themes which came through, and also the questions from the audience. One of them was on city sewage and reaching the ocean, and the rivers are leading to the seas, right? So what are we doing about that? So I don't know if you know, but there's a huge program in India, the Ganges, which is like, the Ganges economy is 50% of the country's population lives along the Ganges. And there's a cleanup program which has been going on for a while. It's quite successful. So it works on 2 fronts. When you try to clean up a river, broadly you do 2 things. You try to increase the e-flow, the environmental flow, so more water, and you want to prevent the bad stuff from entering the river. So this program is seeking to do both. So wastewater treatment plants along critical hotspots of the Ganges have made a big difference. It takes a long time. It took 30 years for for all the European rivers to be cleaned, and this program has been there only for about 7 years. So obviously, if you clean up the river to that extent, you're preventing the bad stuff, including plastics, from reaching. So that's a major program. It's along the Ganges, but it's happening in other rivers as well. But again, in cities, wastewater treatment is a major focus now, and both from a cleanup point of view, but also from a water conservation point of view. India, despite our monsoon, is still a water-stressed country. And therefore, it's very, very important to reuse, talking of the circular economy, the reuse of wastewater is a major agenda. And you can do it in a centralized way, and you can do it in a decentralized way. So that's on wastewater. And if you treat it, then you're preventing it from entering the river, but also the sea. But solid waste management, again, we spoke about behavior change. Now that's the most critical part of life. And so one of the major sort of elements of life is, getting people to, particularly in urban areas, but increasingly in rural as well, is to segregate at home. So if you prevent the stuff from going out and, and you treat it, that will trigger a supply response from the city. You need more recovery facilities, as you're saying. The material recovery facility, MRF, that's increasingly happening in urban areas. And one way to nudge that along is the campaign run by the Ministry of Urban Affairs, which is the Clean City campaign. So they run a Swachh Sarvekshan every year. So they rank cities on cleanliness. And there's a city in Madhya Pradesh called Indore, which typically wins it every year. So getting people to take pride in their own city, to segregate at home, and really getting people involved is going to be critical. And that's a critical part of life. we call it in Hindi a Jan Andolan. How do you get a people's movement going?
Mm.
All these kids and the kids who are interested in protecting the climate, we really need to tap into that. In fact, in the Swachh Bharat mission, which we were running 3-4 years ago, it was school kids, school girls in particular, who came out on the streets and said, listen, we want to have toilets in our village, we want to use them, and we want a clean village. So it was that community which came together and decided that they wanted to have a clean village. So if the kids are coming out and wanting to become ecopreneurs, I think that's one way to go. And we have got a lot of experience in India on these campaigns. So life is another manifestation of that. So I think that whole behavior, it's all connected. Tim spoke about, carbon, blue carbon. I think that's a critical area, particularly in mangroves. So if we can get the communities, so it's livelihoods, so if they can get benefit and you can get carbon credits out of mangrove plantations, it's a huge agenda for India. We want to learn from all the other countries in the world. On our coastlines, how can we, 7,200 kilometers of coastline, how can we develop mangrove plantations all along? That's going to be a major program for us. And I think that will also feature in our G20 presidency working group. That's going to be a major agenda. And if communities can benefit, its livelihoods, as you said, is mainly women. So we have a program called the Rural Employment Guarantee Program called Manrega. So the idea is, how can you use that program? You give gainful employment, but it's nature-based solutions. So it's sort of win-win-win-win all around. And that I'm confident that will figure to a large extent. We spoke about ship breaking, and Rajendra gave us the policy angle on that. But again, it is an issue. In the circular economy, which is a major mission which started by the government about a year ago, scrapping of vehicles, initially we're looking at, there are 40 million vehicles in India which have more than 15 years old. And so there's a whole process, a policy approach to how can we use that and, the vehicles, scrap them in registered places and then use that for green steel to a large extent. Right now it's an informal economy. And even Alang is very much that kind of thing. So I think regulations are in place. It needs now to be rolled out and implemented. But there was a question on whether during the G20, you can coordinate amongst different agencies working on the blue economy. I think that will happen. I think it's a great opportunity during the G20 presidency to coordinate institutionally and in terms of governance of bringing all these agencies together. So I think that's going to be one of the important topics in the environment working group, where the blue economy figures, but also the circular economy. So it all comes together there. I think overall, fascinating discussion. In India, one thing I can tell you that we have the ability to follow the 2 S's, scale and speed. That's something we learned in different programs. In fact, we had 4 S's, scale, speed, stigma. That was in the context of open defecation and sustainability. And those were the big challenges, but also the opportunities. So all the big numbers are coming from India, whether it's on digital, whether it's on drinking water, whether it's on kilometers of highway. So I think it's a little bit of a sweet spot at the moment for India, both nationally and internationally. And I think the G20 presidency is going to give us the opportunity to collaborate with all of you, particularly on the blue economy. So I'm taking all these messages back to India. We'll have a discussion with our G20 secretariat. My predecessor, Amitabh, of course, is our Sherpa. So he's keeping a close eye on what's happening here. It's pity he couldn't be here for Davos. But we'll take this back and we look forward to working with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Param. And you can count on our support. Thank you.
Question to the fragmented world, I think oceans are the best way to unite everybody. Because they
Exactly.
believe the fishes and the marine creatures do not believe in the barriers.
Well said. Yeah. Thank you.